it's very popular and has many applications. And you can hardly find any good publications without any concept of statistical inference. So we have heard about this term population and sample, right? So I hope by now you would have understood what is population and what is a sample. In simple terms, if I would say, this is very important when it comes to statistical concepts, understanding what is population, because usually we refer to population for a group of people, but when it comes to research or in biostatistics, we usually refer to population as it can be anything. It can be people, it can be objects, it can be events, or it can be an aggregate of creature, things, cases, and so on. So it can be a cadaver, it can be a blood sample, anything. So that is called a population. So this population is what the researcher is interested to generalize the results to. So whenever we speak about generalizability of the study, we are thinking at large about the population. So as it is not feasible to study the entire population, we always go for a sample. So sample, what exactly is a sample? It is a representative part of the population, and if it is drawn randomly, then only it becomes a representative part of the population, and the results can be generalized to the population. So most of the time what happens is that, as I told you, there is because of many reasons we cannot study the entire population. So we try to study the sample, and we try to get the results of the sample, and we generalize it back to the population. So that process itself is called as statistical inference. So I'll be coming, I'll be explaining in detail about statistical inference, different concepts, and what are the steps in statistical inference when it comes to testing of hypothesis. That is what my presentation would be for today. So there are some new terms. You would have heard about it quite often, but I'll just take you through most of the commonly used terms in statistical inference. There is something called as parameter. Parameter means it's a population value. So whenever we hear parameter, we have to, in statistics, it means something that is, it's a population value that represents the, it represents the population. For example, if I calculate the mean of the sample, we can say that it's a population mean. But most of the time it is not possible to calculate the population mean. What we do is we estimate the sample mean. So sample mean is called as a statistic. So it's not just a mean, it can be a median, it can be a mode, or any statistical values that you calculate for population is called as parameter. And what we calculate for sample is called as the statistic, statistic, statistic. So that is, this is the usual term that we use in statistical inference, because in statistical inference we use statistic, and then using that we generalize the results to the population. So let's look at a situation. Suppose there are some 1,000 persons, and in those 1,000 persons, they are from a common population. For example, they have a common feature. They are all diabetic patients, or they have a particular BMI. So they are coming from a common population, suppose. Suppose if I take a sample of 10 individuals from that group, I have 1,000 of population. I'm taking a sample of 10 in that group. And from each group, we are calculating the mean heart rate of persons of the samples are calculated. So what will happen? Will the mean be same when we take 10 different samples from the population of 1,000? Will the four means be exactly same, or it will be different? What do you think? It won't be same, right? Because each time you take a sample, you'll get a different mean value, right? if you take, it won't be equal, right? So what is the difference, what is the reason for this? So the difference is because there is something called as sampling variation. So sampling variance is so the difference is whenever two or more samples are considered, the difference may be because of sampling variation, or maybe because of the fact that the samples might have come from the different population or different characteristics value. Another example here is, I can just tell you a simple example. Suppose if I give any of the drug, for example, aspirin for headache or for as a painkiller, to say 1,000 or 100 people, or say 50 or 60 people. So what will happen? Not everyone it will work, right? Not for everyone it might work. It might work for some people. It may not work for some people. So there is a variance. There is a difference in the groups, how it behaves. So that is actually because of sampling variation. So now, how do we quantify the sampling variation? That is using standard error. So as I told you, there is a bigger group, and from the bigger group, I'm taking samples, small samples from that group. And then if I calculate these mean, so I have calculated the mean. So if the 10 samples are chosen from the same population, the standard error of mean of the or the standard error is called as the standard error of the mean is the standard deviation of means of all possible samples. So in this example, what is happening is there are a population consists of say 1,000 people. So I'm taking a sample of 100 each from the population, and I'm calculating the mean and standard deviation. So this is the usual standard deviation we calculate, right? And of the different groups, I'm calculating the standard deviation again. So that is called as the standard error. So standard error of the mean is the standard deviation of all means of all possible samples from the population. So standard deviation, standard error is calculated by standard deviation by square root of n, or the sample size, where n is the sample size and st is the standard deviation. So I'll just tell you about one example of how standard error is calculated. So in order to calculate standard error, we need standard deviation, and we need a number of samples in each group. And I'll tell you about when do we use the standard error exactly, and when do we use the standard deviation. For example, here in this example, there are two groups. One is a particular group of people who are doing this job, printing job, and another group of people who are farmers. So the sample one is 72. The group contains 72 individuals, and in the second group it is 48 individuals. And here I have calculated the mean values of their systolic, diastolic blood pressure, and here also in the second group also the mean value is being calculated, and the corresponding standard deviation of the group. Now when it comes to standard error, we want to compare between the groups here, between the farmers and the printers, and they are all we are comparing between the different groups here. In that concept, we can use standard error. So standard error, as I told you, it is standard deviation divided by square root of n, that is numbers. So it is 0.5753, and this for the farmers, it is 4.2 divided by square root of 48, that becomes 0.61. So that's how, so if you want to, if we have within the group, if you want to see the variation, you can use standard deviation, but between the groups when you're comparing, it's better to use standard error. So we'll look at the difference between the standard deviation and standard error. So standard deviation, we are using it as an estimate of variability of the population from which the sample is drawn. Whereas standard error is a type of standard deviation, and it is the variability of sampling distribution. Sampling distribution means a distribution of several samples. So how do we, how widely the measurements are scattered within the data, we use standard deviation. And if we want to compare between the different groups, then we can use standard error. So in the variability within the sample, we can use standard deviation. When it comes to the comparisons between different samples, which is being drawn randomly, then we can use standard error. So there's a little theoretical concept, that is central limit theorem. So this is actually why I put this slide is because this is the basis for which most of the statistical inference is based on this a particular theorem called as central limit theorem. So there's a mathematical concept which says that if you draw several samples which are randomly from a population, what will happen is the sample distribution of the mean, that is the mean that you the mean that you get, will exhibit a normal distribution. And also, as this the more number of samples you take, it will approach a normal distribution, and variability of the sample mean and the variability of the sample mean so the more number of the samples you take, the variability of the sample mean will also decrease. So that is what the central limit theorem says. So as I told you, the standard error, one of the idea why we use standard error is one is to compare between different groups. And also one more advantage of calculating standard error is for calculating confidence interval. So this is again a very commonly used term which you would have come across, that is confidence interval. So in order to calculate the confidence interval, we need a standard error. So now what is confidence interval? So confidence interval is a range of statistical parameters, including the true value of the parameter contained in the range of certain confidence. So that means I'll just take you to the example directly. So in a study of 100 subjects, it was found that the mean systolic blood pressure was 120 mmHg and standard deviation was 10 mmHg. So we need to find out the confidence interval for the population mean. So as I told you, here it is clearly written that the confidence interval is calculated for the population mean. So this from the 100 subjects, we have calculated the average systolic blood pressure, that is 120, and the standard deviation also. So this is calculated from the sample. Suppose from the hospital data, I have calculated 120 and standard deviation is also calculated. Now this is for the hospital. Now I want to generalize it to a larger population. So how do I generalize? So we calculate a confidence interval. So confidence interval gives you a range in which here it is given as gives you a range for the statistical parameters, including the true value of the parameter. So it will give you a range in which the population parameter would lie. That means if I calculate the confidence interval, I can say that the systolic blood pressure at a population level would be in this to this range. So that is the advantage of calculating confidence interval. So the method in which the confidence interval is calculated is by mean plus minus 1.96 into standard error. 1.96 is approximately equal to 2. So it is, since it is 95%, it is 1.96 or approximately 2 into standard error. So here we put the given mean, that is 120 plus or minus 1.96 into standard error, that is 1, that is calculated as 1 here, SD by root n. So we have calculated standard error as 1. So we have got a range 118 to 122. So this is the range in which the systolic blood pressure would vary at a population level. That is what it means. So that means that 95% of the time, the population systolic blood pressure will lie between 118 and 120 mmHg. Or in other terms, we can say that if we take repeated samples from the same population, if we are taking repeated samples, 95% of the estimates will have the confidence limits containing the true value of the parameter between 118 and 120 mmHg, and only the remaining 5% will be outside the true limits. So that is how we interpret this confidence interval. So I hope you understood what is standard error and what is confidence interval. So standard error is basically used to measure the variability between the different samples, between the different groups or samples taken from the same population. And whereas this confidence interval is standard error used to estimate the confidence interval also. So here you can see the most commonly used confidence interval is 90, 95 and 99. So the 95% confidence interval is calculated by mean plus minus 1.96 into standard error, and 99% is mean plus or minus 2.57 into standard error. So this value, this actually is it's like in normal distribution, you know that mean plus minus 2 standard deviation covers 95% of the area under the curve. The same concept is being applied here. Now there are different methods in which standard error is calculated for depending upon the situations.
Papaya.
Sorry for the interruption. Hello. Hello. I hope you can hear.
Please continue.
Okay. Okay. So the standard error of proportion, for example, you're comparing probability of occurrence of an event and non-occurrence of an event. Like, for example, the success rate after a surgery, that is P, the proportion of occurrence of an event, and Q is 1 minus P. So or 100 minus P. So this is how we calculate for proportion. If the outcome event is a proportion, so it need not be mean always. For example, systolic blood pressure, it's a continuous variable. So we calculate SD by root n, square root of SD by square root of n. But when it is a proportion, we use this equation to calculate the standard error. But the concept is the same. Now, when we have to compare between two different means, that means I have group 1 and group 2, and I have to calculate the standard error for two groups, then we have to use this equation, that is SD1 square by N1 plus SD2 square by N2. And same way, if you have two proportion in a particular intervention group, you want to see the success rate of a surgery, another in control group. So you can use this equation, that is P1 Q1 by N1 plus P2 Q2 by N2. So this again depends on the situations, how many groups you're comparing and things like that. So one thing you have to remember is standard error is very closely associated with sample size. So if the sample size is standard error decreases with increasing sample size. That means if you have in your study, if you're including more samples, then your standard error will be less. And your confidence interval also will be less. Whereas you have a small sample size, what will happen is the variability is more, and hence your confidence interval that you get will be wide. So that's why we always, when you do any study, we always suggest on calculating the appropriate sample size so that you can generalize the result with a precise results that we can obtain, and the variability also will be less. So did you understand about the confidence interval? Because most of the things will be connected. That's why this is actually a little different concept, standard error. But I wanted to tell you because test of significance is related to this standard error and confidence interval. Everything comes under this test of significance or statistical inference. So let's look at the definition of statistical inference. So statistical inference is the method of drawing inference about a population from a sample taken from the population or from a sample drawn from the population. So you have a larger group here, and from this larger group you're taking a smaller part, and from the conclusion that you're getting, you are just trying to draw inference about the population, about the from the samples that you have taken from the population. So that's called as statistical inference. And there are different methods in statistical inference. So when we in statistical inference, we are always talking about the unknown population value, and hence there are different methods in statistical inference. One is point estimation, the second one is interval estimation, and third one is testing of hypothesis. So point estimation means you just calculate, so for example, you calculate mean hemoglobin level of adolescent children. So that becomes a point estimation from a sample of different schools. That becomes a point estimation. Now, if you are doing an interval estimation, you estimate the mean hemoglobin level of that adolescent age group, and then you calculate the confidence interval. You say that you calculate the standard error, then you calculate the confidence interval, and you say that the range in which the unknown population value for hemoglobin will vary between say 11.5 to 12 or 13. So that is how we do interval estimation. Now, when it comes to testing of hypothesis, we have an assumption which we want to test. We want to see whether it is true or not. So that comes under testing of hypothesis. So that is the difference between point interval and testing of hypothesis. So now let's look at testing of hypothesis, what exactly it means. So test of hypothesis, it's a rule or procedure which makes one decide about the acceptance or rejection of the hypothesis about the population. So whenever we say hypothesis, it is about the population, not for the sample. That is the major thing that you have to remember. So let's see what is hypothesis. Hypothesis is an assumption about the population parameter. So any assumption that you make about the population is called as the hypothesis. For example, hypothesis, forming of hypothesis can be based on you can base it on many criteria, like for example, based on your experience, based on review of literature, all those you can, from all those things you can formulate your own hypothesis from your own research experience and so on. So for example, depression and coronary heart disease. So if you're in your private practice, you're in your daily practice, you may find that there is some relation between those who have depression and those who had coronary heart disease and depression. So what you do is you try to make an assumption. Maybe you have seen it in past few years that some kind of a link is there. So you try to you try to create a hypothesis. You try to see whether it is true at large, or you try to generalize the result to the population. You try to see whether it is true or not. So that comes in the hypothesis testing part. So when we say about hypothesis, there are two types of hypothesis. One is called as null hypothesis, and the other one is called as alternate hypothesis. So what is null hypothesis? Null hypothesis is a baseline hypothesis which is usually of the form that there is no difference or there is no association. So null hypothesis is like a neutral statement that you make. This is like, usually we say that we state the null hypothesis as there's no difference, there's no association. It's a kind of neutral statement. And the alternate hypothesis is that there is a difference, or if you say there is an association, that's called as an alternate hypothesis. So if I see this, if you take this example, is a new treatment equally effective in reducing blood pressure as the existing treatment? So here you want to know whether the both are equal or not. So that is what you want to know. So in that case, the null hypothesis will be the new treatment is not equally effective as existing treatment in reducing blood pressure. And the alternate hypothesis is that the new treatment is equally effective as existing treatment in reducing blood pressure. So this is how the hypothesis has to be formulated. So the null hypothesis is denoted by H0 or H0, and alternate hypothesis is usually denoted by H1. So there's another hypothesis here. Is there an association between blood pressure and risk of cardiovascular disease? So here you can have a hypothesis like there is no association. That will be the null hypothesis. There is no association between blood pressure and risk of cardiovascular disease, versus yes, there is an association between blood pressure or high blood pressure and risk of cardiovascular disease. So that's how we have to formulate the null and alternate hypothesis. So after in testing of hypothesis, basically there are two types of errors. One is called as type 1 error and the second one is called as type 2 error. Now what is type 1 error? So it's like telling that a person have a disease in reality and the test results show that he has a disease, and the test result wrongly indicates that he doesn't have the disease, and the test results wrongly indicate that the particular condition or attribute is present. So it's like a false positivity. So that's called as type 1 error. Same way, there is something called as type 2 error. So type 2 error means accepting the null hypothesis when it is false. That is, a person have a disease in reality and the test result wrongly indicates that the particular condition or attribute is absent. That is false negative error. So if you write it in this format, that is in the null hypothesis, when we say that we reject the null hypothesis when it is true, that is called as type 1 error, or when you accept the null hypothesis when it is false, that is called as the type 2 error, or beta error. So that I'll come to the next slide then. So if you cannot remember this, you can think about in this terms. It's like type 1 error is called as, this is better. So this is how it is. This is a false positive error and type 2 error is the false negative error. Now the chance of committing type 1 error is called as alpha error. So what is the probability or chance of committing type 1 error? That is called as alpha error. And what we have to do is we have to always try to keep the alpha error as low as possible. So this alpha error is also So this alpha error is also connected to the concept of p-value. So if alpha error, the alpha level or the type 1 error or alpha error is also called as the p-value. That is, if you have a lesser p-value of 0.05 indicates that you are willing to accept 5% chance that you are wrong when you reject the null hypothesis. So that means the chance factor that you are, the chance that you are wrong, that is only 5%. So we try to minimize this as much as possible. So that's conventionally we usually take as 5%. So traditionally, as I told you, the alpha error is set as 5% or 1%. As there are only 5 or 1 in 100 chance that the variation that we are seeing is because of chance factor. That is what it means when we say it is when we say the p-value is less than 0.05. That means there is only 5 or 1 in 5% chance that the variation that we are seeing is because of chance factor. So if it is 1%, that means it is 1 out of 100. Now the probability of committing type 2 error is called as beta error. So we cannot rule out alpha error or beta error in any study. So because it is a kind of it's more or less like a court trial. We are trying to gather evidence against the null hypothesis. That's how it happens. So there will be a possibility of error always. So what we are doing, so you have to decrease the risk of committing the type 2 error, and then you have to ensure that you have enough power for the study. I'll tell you what is power. Power means it is the magnitude, like for example, if you want to see how good your study is in detecting that real difference or magnitude of difference. So that is called as power. So the power is 90 means usually a power of 80 or 90 is considered to be very good. So power is actually the right decision, actually, we can say. So power of 90 means 90 times out of 100, the investigator would observe an effect of that size or larger in his study. So that is what it means, like power. So that's why we consider this concept when we calculate the sample size also, which we'll be discussing later on. So in many studies, we know that usually the alpha will be set at 0.05 or 5%, and the power usually it will be like 80, 85, 90, 95, like that. 99 also, very rarely. So you can see here, this is null hypothesis. In this diagram, you can see this is null hypothesis and this is alternate hypothesis, or this is the any mean value. So if you increase one, the other decrease. So what will happen is we try to reduce the type 1 error and we try to increase the type 2 error. So now let's look at what are the different steps in testing of hypothesis. So in testing of hypothesis, the first step is you have to state the null and alternate hypothesis. You have to fix the level of significance, determine the best statistical test which is appropriate, then find the table value of the test statistic. Then if the calculated value is greater than the table value, we reject the null hypothesis. And then the last step is inference about the population that you have to make from the null hypothesis. So let's see what is a test statistic. So this level of significance is nothing but the alpha error itself. So usually level of significance is taken as 5%. That's what I mentioned in the earlier slide. Now here you can see we have to determine the best statistical test for the stated null hypothesis. So that is we use some test statistic and then that is used for testing purpose. So what is this test statistic? So the test statistic is the distribution of the sample data. So here you can say, for example, if you are comparing two groups and and the type of comparison is mean comparison. And then if your sample size is small, you can use the test statistic as t-test. If it is large, you can use z-test statistic. So this test statistic will depend on your situation. So you have to decide, looking at the data, type of data, how many groups you're comparing, etc. You have to decide what is the distribution of the variables, how it is distributed. Is it normally distributed, so and so, and then you have to decide the correct test that you have to use. So when we in the next class, when you look at the different tests in testing of hypothesis, you will understand that the test statistic is different for each test. So we calculate this test statistic. Okay, so this test statistic is calculated depending upon the groups, the type of variables, and all those assumptions. Now the once the test statistic is calculated, you have to find the critical value. You get the critical value. So critical value is also called as calculated value. So once you decide which test you have to apply, you calculate using, you decide the test status. For example, for chi-square, for a chi-square test, we use chi-square test statistic. For ANOVA, it is F test statistic. For t-test, it is test statistic. So based on that, you calculate using the equation, you calculate, you get a result. So that's called as a calculated value. The next step is you have to find the corresponding table value. So the table value means it's like here you can see, for example, if the data follows a normal distribution, you're comparing means and data follows normal distribution. So those who know about the property of the normal distribution, you will understand that 95% of the observation will lie between 95% will lie between mean plus or minus 2 standard deviation. So that's why we have 2 written here. This 2 is actually it is 1.96. It's been rounded off and written as 2 here. So each value, so each point will have a value. Okay, so area under any particular area we can calculate, and there will be a value for z between all these points. There will be a value for z. So that's called as a table value. So table value we have for reference purpose. There is a table value behind any statistical textbooks, or if you see community medicine park textbook also, there is table value given. So the table value you have to check from the table for the corresponding test. And then if the calculated value, that is what you have calculated using the test statistic, is greater than the table value, then you reject the null hypothesis. And if it is less, you do not reject the null hypothesis. And the inference about the population has to be made. And the last step, the inference about the population has to be made from the null hypothesis. So yes, so here you can see, suppose the calculated value. Suppose the calculated value is, we can say that suppose it was 2.36, what we have calculated. So the table value is for 95, our alpha is 95. So the table value is, sorry, alpha is 5%. So the table value is around say 1.96. So the calculated value is 2.3, table value is 1.9. So we can say that the calculated value is greater than the table value. So what we have to do is we have to reject the null hypothesis. So this depends on the test that you have applying. So the table value you have to refer, then you have to check the calculated value and then decide whether to accept or reject the null hypothesis. So I'll just tell you one more concept about one-tailed and two-tailed test. There are, this is very commonly used. So two-tailed test means it depends on the direction of the hypothesis. For example, if your hypothesis says that there is no difference in the, hemoglobin levels between males and females. So there's no difference versus there is a difference. So that is a two-tailed hypothesis because the directionality is like equal versus not equal. So that is called as a two-tailed hypothesis. So you can see for a two-tailed hypothesis, this is how the distribution would look like. So 5% will be distributed on both sides. Now, if it's a one-tailed hypothesis, for example, in your study, you want to see that after giving a particular intervention, you want to see whether there is an increase in the BP level after particular intervention or something. Then you have to use a one-tailed hypothesis. So you can say that there was an improvement of this much value. The BP has improved by this much value. So that way it becomes a one-tailed, one-directional hypothesis. So there you're not looking at whether there is a difference or not. Here you're interested in to say that whether there is an increase or whether there is a decrease. Such hypothesis is called as a two-tailed hypothesis. And also here you can see for a two-tailed hypothesis, it's just it's on one side that we have highlighted the curves. So that is how it becomes one-tailed. And so this is a final conclusion. That is, if the calculated value is greater than the table value, we reject the null hypothesis. We say that there is no association we have rejected, and we say that there is an association, for example. So when we say there is, when in statistics, when we say it is significant, what does it really mean is that it can be like we can just say that the chance factor is less, or the difference what we see is unlikely because of chance factor. And when we say it is non-significant, it does not necessarily mean that there is no real difference. It means that the observed difference could be easily due to chance. So that's what the p-value also tells. So if the p-value is less, that means the chance factor is less. And there are two types of tests basically when we do any type of test of significance. One is called as parametric test, and the other one is called as non-parametric test. So what is parametric test? Parametric test is a test which has certain assumption about the parameters of the population. So we assume that, for example, we assume that the data follows normal distribution. For most of the parametric tests, we assume that the data follows normal distribution. And when it is a non-parametric test, the data need not follow any particular distribution. We can also apply this test when the data is nominal or ordinal or categorical, such kind of qualitative data. We can use this non-parametric test. And also, if the data is not following normal distribution, we can go for a non-parametric test. But parametric test is considered to be a more better as compared to non-parametric test. And there are different types of parametric and non-parametric test. One is Z-test, then paired t-test, unpaired t-test, ANOVA, 2V ANOVA, repeated measures of ANOVA, and so on. And in non-parametric test, there is chi-square test, Fisher's exact test, Wilcoxon sign rank test, Mann-Whitney U-test, sign test, Kruskal-Wallis, Friedman's, McNemar's test, and so on. So in the next class, probably, most probably Anita will be discussing about what these tests are about and what are the different assumptions for each test. And as I told you, the test statistic also is different. The calculation part is different for each of the tests. Then we have to compare it with the table value and then make the conclusion. So she'll be talking in detail about these tests in the next class. So today we discussed about the methods of drawing inference from the population using statistical inference and how the results are generalized to the population. Then we discussed about a standard error, calculating confidence interval, and how to calculate, how to interpret the confidence interval. Then we discussed about what are the different steps in testing of hypothesis. Basically those 5 important steps, that is from framing the null and alternate hypothesis to concluding or inference. Then we discussed about what are the different parametric and non-parametric tests that are available, and what are the situations in which or what are the different names of those parametric and non-parametric tests. So I think if you need any more explanation for any of those or any of these concepts, please let me know, because I think still there is some 5 minutes time, so we can have a discussion. Because this concepts like it's like we have to we keep forgetting these kinds of things because there are so many terms involved in it, and interpretation wise also we have to be a little careful. So in case if you have come across any such situations or you have any questions for me, you can ask it now. There are something.
Any questions?